All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, Monday, June 9th. We are here at the Oregon School District Innovation Center. I'll call this meeting to order. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak, Dr. Bush, Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Hensel, Dr. Lakuta, Ms. Wright,
Here.
Mr. Pinkratz.
Present. Board has a quorum, and Anna will be arriving momentarily. And Mary, I know Mary is out tonight. Let's see here. Proof of notice of the meeting and approval of the agenda. So Katie has provided us with proof of that the agenda has been posted. For our agenda tonight, we have our typical consent calendar. We have 5 action items, including a couple of budget items, open enrollment, food service prices, and we have 1 policy coming to us from Policy Committee. And then we have our committee reports, typical information items, and then the board will be going into closed session at the end of this meeting, and we will not reconvene in open session after tonight. So I will take a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
I'll make that.
Motion by Heather. Is there a second? Second by Nathan. Katie, call the roll, please.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Hensel, Ms. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Pinkratz.
Yes, motion carries 4-0. All right, first item on the agenda is our consent calendar. Would anyone like any items on the consent calendar removed? All right, if none, I'll take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll make it again.
Motion by Heather. Second by Nathan. All right, so I would like to go over a couple items on the consent calendar. So we do have some retirements. Our business ed teacher at OHS, Sarah Kissling, is retiring after 19 years of service to the district. Spanish teacher at the high school, Barbara Werner, is retiring after 35 years of experience. And our student services admin assistant at RCI, Cynthia Berry, is retiring after 21 years of service. So we greatly appreciate those team members' dedication to our district and thank them for their service. We do have, I won't read the new contract, all of the new contract assignments, but we do have several new educators coming into our district, many new at this time of the year, so that is great to see. And then we have a very long list of board donations tonight. I will hit the highlights. So from the Friends of the Orchestra, we have $125 for reimbursement of expenses for WSMA and S&E medals. From the Northeast Optimist Club of Madison, we have a $4,000 donation for youth-oriented programming at Worth Woods. From Wisco Industries, we have a $1,000 donation for the Wisco Industries Scholarship. And from the Woger family, we have a $300 food service donation. In addition to those donations, we have 20 families that have donated the balance of their food service budget to the district, and we have 27 families that have donated to the FES 6th grade send-off, and an additional 10 FES families that have donated to field trips. So as always, we are greatly appreciative of all of our community donations. Let's see, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Hensel,
Yes.
Dr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Wright,
Yes.
Mr. Pinkratz.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Next up, public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Anyone here for public comment? Anyone for public comment? All right, we'll move on. OEA report. Is there an OEA report? Nothing from OEA. And it is summer, so no students tonight. Which takes us to our first action item, C1, the 2024-2025 budget adjustments, and that is Mr. Weiland.
Thank you.
I don't want to read this all to you, but I thought I'd go through it a little bit just in summary, and then if people have questions, be absolutely happy to answer those. So the process that may seem a little strange, and I'm not saying that it's not, but typically at the end of each year, we come back and do budget adjustments for the year that we're completing. The intent there is just to communicate kind of how things happened and where things kind of moved around from the year. The intent is not to obviously have additional spending authority because the fiscal year is pretty much over already. So just kind of a recap. We'll also do a recap as we get to the annual meeting and everything's audited and everything, but this is kind of a precursor to that. So things change throughout the year. We get grants, numbers become known that were estimates, those types of things, and that sometimes actually does change the spending authority a little bit. The first item does do that, but we're required to spend that money, and that's money from the Common School Fund, which is a fund that the state actually accumulates funds from borrowing money to other organizations, municipalities, those types of things, as well as fines and penalties and stuff that they put out. It goes into a special fund and then is distributed to school districts for library books mainly, but also technology that's housed in the library and the like. So we always estimate a number at the beginning of the year, but we actually have to spend the number that they tell us, and they don't tell us that dollar amount until January. So, and if we don't spend the amount of money that they give us, then they take it away from us. So we have to spend it during that fiscal year. So that's the first thing this year. And we always are a little conservative because we don't want the librarians to spend more money than we might get. So we're on the conservative side of the estimate. And so this year we got about $85,000 more. That number has been growing, partially because the money that the state loans to other institutions, just like interest rates have gone up, interest rates for the state have gone up as well. And so the interest revenue actually funds this fund. So that's how the mechanics of that works. So if interest rates go down, the fund would get a little bit smaller. In addition, there are just other miscellaneous grants and those types of things. We just talked about a couple of them that we get throughout the year. So we're just basically modifying the revenues and the expenses so that there is no impact on fund balance, but we have to increase the expenses and to match the revenues throughout the year that happen. Categorical reimbursement aid is a big one. We were perhaps just a little bit too we listened to the state a little bit more than we should have. And expenses actually went up, and I think I've talked about this a few times. Expenses in special education categorical aid actually went up 8% in the state last year, and were funded based on the prior year's expenses. The pool of money was only budgeted for a 3% increase. So there was a difference there. And this is one of the things you might be hearing in the budget debate about some certain and some sufficient. Some certain means there's a certain amount of dollars, and when they're gone, they're gone. And basically everybody that submits expenses gets a portion of the pie based on that some certain amount. Some sufficient means if we say it's going to be 33%, it's going to be 33%, and the state has to make up the difference somewhere, but it's going to be 33% of those expenses. So we were under some certain amount and only went up 3%. We budgeted, I think it was supposed to be 33%. We thought we were being cautious and budgeted 32.4, and lo and behold, it came in about 30.3. Now it's a touch higher than we actually got the final numbers this morning. And instead of being $210,000 off, we're only about $180,000 loss. So from what we had anticipated. So still a significant chunk of money, but a little bit better than we knew when we put this out on Friday. So that's something that I'll just mention real briefly in relationship to the budget negotiations that are going on right now. Just to highlight something, because if you've been following the budget negotiations that are going on, we're starting to get an indication of what the Joint Finance Committee is at least asking people to cost. And one of the things that they're costing right now is not related to categorical reimbursement where we want them to cost. The whole education community was pretty much unified from every group that you could identify, wanted us to basically increase the pool of money from 33% or 30% to 60%. That was the ask. What it seems like the legislature is doing based on the information they're asking from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau to cost is something entirely different. And I think it's important to just have people know this. Instead of costing the categorical reimbursement program, they're asking the Legislative Fiscal Bureau to cost the high cost needs program. Now, the high cost needs program only really benefits about 50% of the state because you have to have a student that has quite a bit of need, and so a lot of costs associated with that person before this particular program, categorical aid program, kicks in. So they can increase the funding for that. It doesn't cost them that much to do it, compared to categorical funding, which would fund everybody in the state at a more equitable basis. So just wanted to kind of draw some attention to that while we were going through this, because this is exactly what we're asking them to fund this next year. Any questions on that? Yeah, Leslie.
So with that specific thing in mind, because it kind of is a couple of things you talked about there. One ties into the individual nurse that was required. That is what they're trying to fund.
They're trying to fund
the
better.
24,000 that we're
Yep.
talking about, as opposed to what we're really wanting them to fund, which ended up being the 180,000.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So with that, and this is, I am not a financial expert, so take it as you will, and just you tell me what you think. I understand why we wouldn't want footnotes on our audit and the importance of that. But in a situation such as this, when the legislature isn't paying attention to what all the education, in all of the districts are interested in, wouldn't this be a way to kind of, hey, you're not doing what we need?
Yeah, it's something that we would then talk about after when the audit comes out. The negative to that, if there is one, is that right now is when the time we want to be talking about that, because it influences the negotiations, hopefully. I'm not saying that people listening to us are going to probably move the tide, but if we all did this, perhaps that would help put some light on where we really need them to fund. So that's why I think it's good to take the opportunity now. The audit, hopefully the budget will be done by then. There's a possibility that it won't. But that's what I would kind of convey back. Other questions? Otherwise, I'll just keep going real quickly. I know this is probably taking me longer than you had hoped. So there were some other offsets that we use to do that. One is called property in lieu of property. That's not right. When I just looked it up, it's basically a DNR revenue that when school districts or municipalities have property in their municipality that's basically property tax exempt. It's payment in lieu of taxes. Sorry, property taxes. They will contribute a certain amount of money to kind of make the municipality whole for that land that is property tax exempt from a state perspective. So that came in a little bit higher than what we were anticipating. So we kind of made some adjustments there to try to cover the $210,000 deficit that we had because of special education. We also anticipate, I think, what else did I write here? I'm sorry. Interest income. We had anticipated interest income to decrease faster than it has. If you've been following that, if you're listening to people last year, they were saying that interest rates were going to start coming down. They haven't come down yet, so therefore we've been making a little bit more interest revenue than we had anticipated. And I think that might be it on that page. The other thing that we mentioned is that this is kind of an inter-fund transfer component here because the revenue, the special education categorical revenue would be going to the special education fund, which would then the transfer would be what we anticipated it to be. Since it's not at where we anticipated, what's going to happen is that transfer between the general fund and the special education fund is going to increase. So that's an adjustment that we're making as well. Just kind of going through there, and I accidentally closed the item. So the next one is more of just a way to maximize revenue for us. It's related to what's called indirect costs. we can identify administrative costs with the administration of the IDEA program, which is a federal program for special education. We can recognize those costs. The reason we do that is because if we claim those costs in the grant, then we can move other things out of the grant and move them into the education, the general fund. And when they're in the general fund, then they're categorical reimbursable. So even though it's only 32%, it's better than zero. So we kind of move that around each year just to do that, and we're recognizing that as well. We talked about the individual nurse for the student that needed that nurse this year, and included that in here. And then another thing that we did, and the board has heard me talking about this for a while now, is our general fund, actually the fund balance is not kept up with where it really needs to be in order to cash flow, which is the goal of policy 611. And so last fall, we were able to basically find a reoccurring revenue source for our Grow Your Own program. We had originally slated that to come from fund balance, and because we found that $50,000 annually to go into that program, we were able to not utilize the $249,000 that was, or $237,000 that was left from that fund. So we're going to unassign those dollars and basically let those go into unassigned fund balance and help increase that. The next item is related to that as well, and that's that debt service transfer that we were anticipating to do. Because of this fund balance concern that we have, we made the choice in early or late winter, I guess it was, to not transfer that to debt service and let that grow into the fund balance. Again, there's several reasons for this from a fund balance perspective. One is meeting the policy intent of policy 611. But there are other reasons as well. The uncertainty that we have, both from a federal and a state level, means that we really should try to grow our, if you would, our fund balance or contingency in case things change for us. And the other thing that's nice about it, and I just mentioned before, is it does produce some interest revenue for us that will be able to be spent in other areas of our budget. And then just some minor function adjustment changes otherwise throughout the fund. So there's a couple charts on here, I think. If anybody, or is that, no, that's the, no, there it is, yeah. We will not, in the past, we have put this into the newspaper. There is some cost associated with that. When we look through the statute, it actually allows us now to put it on our website. So we won't be doing that. We'll just be posting this on the website should the Board of Education approve it. And that's just a functional area, kind of the things that are changing within the budget. And that's it for the changes in the adopted budget, if there's any questions.
Any clarifying questions for Mr. Weiland? Go ahead, Caleb.
I have one question that speaks directly to our budget, and then a more general question kind of related to the special education funding. At the end of everything, it says in the original budget, we had a budget deficit of $4.885
Yep.
million, and then it's going to shrink to $3.398 million. That budget deficit, if I remember correctly, right, is only it takes into account the fact that if we have all of these one-time expenses, if we draw money out for all of those one-time expenses, then we would be
Balanced.
in that position.
Yep.
It's not. I guess it's not a true budget deficit because that money is probably not all going to be spent all at once.
By definition, it's a deficit, but it's not a structural deficit. It's intentional. And the only way that you can spend fund balance is to budget expenditures over revenues, and so therefore that creates the deficit. But yeah, you're exactly correct. These are assigned fund balances that we knew we were going to bring over from year to year for the purposes of different components. And if you look through our financial packet, for instance, it almost spells those out. It does spell those ideas, those different assigned fund balances out in the fund balance summary, what each component of that is for.
Yeah, I thought it was important to just highlight that because anytime I think someone sees budget deficit, people get a little anxious.
Me included.
Yeah, and I thought that it was important to highlight that and just clarify that. The other question I have, and this is a more general question that I'm just going to throw out there, and perhaps you can speak to it, perhaps you can't. But, you know, when we look at the categorical aid for special education and the fact that the state support for that continues to diminish, I think as a district, we've been in a very fortunate position that we've been able to deal with that fairly well. You know, we're taking money from other parts of the budget and, you know, making special education funding whole. Do you have a sense, is this, the fact that that it's underfunded as much as it is, do you have a sense how many districts or other districts in the state, that challenge, that underfunding challenge is a much bigger burden for them than it is necessarily for us? Not that it's not a burden for us, but I just wonder if how many, like, are we approaching a tipping point where this is going to be kind of an unmanageable situation unless the special education funding begins to go up?
Yeah, I would definitely say that we're approaching that for some districts. We have had the benefit of an extremely supportive community. And other districts have not been in that position. And I think that's where it really becomes tough, because they're either spending their fund balance, and we're talking about actually building ours in case the uncertain happens. They're actually dealing with those uncertainties and either using fund balance or starting to cut deep into the ability to provide education. And that, I've talked about this before, it really produces a very untenable situation, because then what happens is if you can't provide sufficient services to your community, people move away. And as I've shared with the board, when people move away, the funding travels with the person. And then that becomes a problem, because not only is it the funding for the marginal costs associated with educating those students, it's also the administrative costs. And when I say administrative, I'm not just saying the people that are at the table here, I'm saying utilities, librarians, secretaries, custodians, all those different costs are in that per student amount as well. And so that really does create a problem for those districts that you have to have a heartfelt care for. I don't know how they do it year after year. So absolutely, and I think, we were just talking a little bit about this before the board meeting. If the legislature puts the money into the high cost needs, we'll figure out a way to maximize that as much as we can. But it's not equitable from a statewide perspective, because only 50% of the school districts apply for that high cost need. So, and how many of those are going to be able to maximize that as much as possible? So really why we're advocating for this from a universal point of view is it's much more equitable to increase that percentage, because it helps more people in the state of Wisconsin. Does that make sense? Was that a decent answer? Okay.
I wanted to also comment on special education, and Andy, thank you for your work on this. This is excellent to see. Caleb, you said dealing well, which I appreciate what you were trying to say, because that means that Mr. Weiland is doing a phenomenal job at his job, making something out of nothing. But I also want to really be careful about the dealing well side of it. So I just want to flip on this, because help me if I'm wrong here, but when I look at the $12.8 million that we're spending, is that right? That we've spent this
In special education. Yep.
So just, again, to boil it down, if we're being reimbursed at 31%, that we're getting $4 million from the state. That means that 8.8 rounding is coming from our
General fund.
general fund, which means that $8.8 million, I hope for the 42 people listening or watching this, is coming from the general fund to support special education, which we absolutely should do. This is not about us not doing it, it's about not getting money from the state. If the 60% number that we're hoping for, if that were the case this year, sorry, my gratitude alarm is going off. If that were the case this year, we would have $7.7 million from the state, which means we would only have to do $5 million from our general fund. And I just think that is such a number that I had no idea about, and I'm pretty sure the general community, although they're smart and wonderful, doesn't know about those specific numbers. And so Gina, tell me if, wait, you're not here anymore, you're over there. You're not Gina. Gina, tell me if I have to stop talking, but I just want to say that the Wisconsin Public Education Network, I'm on their email list. They do a wonderful job of kind of spelling this out, not for our district specifically, but for the state. So there's a joint finance committee meeting this Thursday. They have wonderful ways that you're able to contact your legislatures. Am I okay to say that? And to, contact Governor Evers' office, because that is one of the things that could come from this $7+ billion surplus that our state is sitting on.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, that we have a very important person that represents a part of Oregon, and that's the Joint Finance Co-Chair. So please feel free to reach out to him and share your opinions. That is a very powerful position in the state budget negotiations.
Any other clarifying questions for Mr. Weiland? Yes, Leslie.
Andy, okay, sorry. Going back to the high cost, sorry, what's it called?
High cost needs.
High cost needs. What, in this case, it was 24,000. But what constitutes a high cost need?
So I'm doing this from a little bit of memory, but it's a certain amount of net cost over, I believe, $30,000 a student. And net cost is important. So you subtract out the categorical aid that you would get for the students. There's all kinds of deductible receipts components that are part of that. But once you get all those different aid components kind of taken out and calculated, if it's over $30,000, then you get to basically submit a reimbursement. And again, I don't want to take too much focus away from the categorical, because that's what we really want. But then what happens is whatever the money is that's available in the pool for the high cost needs gets prorated, and it gets prorated fairly significantly. So that's the thing that the Joint Finance Committee is kind of trying to spin, because they could not prorate as much there, and it wouldn't cost them much money compared to, Heather just did the math for Oregon, and you can see the amount of money if you take that times 420 districts. We're all different sizes, and we're a fairly large district in our state. It can add up very quickly.
If there's not any other clarifying questions, Nathan, go ahead.
Not a clarifying question, but just more of a comment too. In going through, similar to the question Caleb had around, the original budget with the deficit piece. Andy and I had a great call this afternoon. I'm just saying that more for awareness, that I too have appreciation and deep understanding, not only through my reading, but also through, Andy helping me understand as well. So I just say that for the benefit of all, that I too understand the depth and detail and support kind of what this is and where this is headed. So I just want to throw that in as well before we head to vote. Thank you.
Great. All right, I'll take a motion. Motion by Nathan, second by Anna. Any further discussion on this topic? If not, Katie, please call the roll.
Mr. Hensel?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Thanks, Andy, for reducing the amount of footnotes on our audit.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, we will move to C2, our 25-26 June preliminary budget. Back to you, Mr. Weiland.
So over the years, I've talked about kind of the Frankenstein way that the state of Wisconsin makes us create our budget. And this is actually a step to try to make that a little bit more logical. We've always done preliminary revenue estimates so that we can figure out what our staffing plan is, typically in March of each year. To some extent, that's actually starting to commit to a budget for the following year, right? Because so much of our district's expenditures is based on staffing. So there are recommendations out there which only make sense. I want to make sure that's clear, that you should have a budget in place before you start your fiscal year. Well, our fiscal year starts on July 1. And so I'm recommending taking this step to actually kind of approve with some modifications, which we detailed in the agenda item, kind of approving a very preliminary budget from a fund level. So we're not, even though we've done all the calculations at a higher level, rather than spending a lot of people's time and effort kind of formatting that and putting it into a beautiful document, we're just asking you to approve kind of a fund level budget at this time. All the detail does exist. We're tracking that, we're changing that, and all that type of thing. We will then produce the more whatever you want to call it, detailed, pretty whatever budgets for you later in September, and then in October again, as we go through the budget process that we've gone through for the last 2.5 decades that I've been with us. But basically just kind of codifying the estimates that we've used to create our staffing plan for this year in this process. So Erica helped us with this little graphic here to kind of show all the different components and how we're going through things. And we're just adding a step which makes sense from a logical perspective to have a budget in place before July 1. Otherwise, the concern is, people could just start spending and basically claim, well, we didn't have a budget in place. Now, we would never do that, but it's just a recommended practice to put something in place like this. So that's the intent of this agenda item, is to just give folks a kind of a feel for things, and then also to kind of tell you what's changed since March. We came up with all the changes. The budget is an ever-evolving document. It's even, like I said, we just approved a moment ago the adjustments for last year's budget. It keeps continually changing. The intent is never to add expenses that we don't have revenues for, but things do constantly morph through the process. So we identified those things. I won't go through them for you individually, but just kind of there they are if you have any questions. And then we'll come back, and there should be one more attachment. Oh, yep, there's the additional funds updates. Again, I'm happy to answer these all, but I realize I've been talking a little bit too much probably. And then the last page is this June preliminary budget, and it's just a fund thing. So I'll just go through for you on this. The one thing to keep in mind with this is we are not bringing forward, as we talked about, Caleb talked about before, those assigned fund balances. So what we're bringing forward is a balanced budget for you at this time. Once those budgets are all audited and we have carryover amounts identified, we will then bring those to you probably for the preliminary budget. But for right now, what we're trying to demonstrate to you is that we have a balanced budget as best we can with the information that we know. So in the general fund, you can see that there's a preliminary budget difference between revenue and expenses of 0. I'll kind of go through this. Fund 27 is also 0. You'll see that from the last year's budget, it is also 0. By law, that budget has to have a 0 impact. The change is always the transfer between the two funds. So that's how that works. Special Revenue Trust Fund, that's kind of like people giving us gifts or grants that would extend from year to year. That's where those things are, as well as we also put some student activity information in there. They're not true student activities from DPI's perspective because they don't have a treasurer. We have a staff member typically act as the liaison, and because of that, it's not in what's called Fund 60, which are agency funds, but those are where those live as well. We don't spend a tremendous amount of time with Fund 20 because really it's based on what people's actions are, as well as our actions to spend the funds. So it differs on year-to-year basis, but there's no property tax or state revenue in that fund at all. Debt service fund is exactly what it is. It pays the bonds, and it will differ from year to year based on if we're going to, for instance, defease any debt, which we will probably do this next year, and I realize I owe you a recommendation on that, as well as just the bond payments are kind of calculated a little bit differently than how the revenue comes in and how it's collected. So there's always a difference in that fund depending on if you're paying off debt or if you're basically incurring additional debt. Long-term capital fund is exactly what that sounds like. Those are things of large capital projects that we'll be using on a year-to-year. Basically, we still have the $300,000 in there for the the kindergarten renovation for Netherwood Knoll. Those bids did come in a little bit higher than what we had anticipated for this summer, so we're reworking that, but we're bringing it forward to next year, and we might modify that number. It is still 300,000. You're seeing 260 because we're discounting the revenue that we'd bring in over this next year, which was anticipated to be 40,000, and so that's why you see the 260 net. Capital Projects Fund, just real briefly, that's the fund that we sold bonds for when we created Forest Edge. Another component in that Forest Edge referendum was for safety issues, and we've been slowly doing safety components of that. We will probably, most likely, and I've said this probably for at least 2 years in a row, but that fund will probably be expired by the end of this year, so we'll have a zero in that. Food Service Fund, we're going to talk about here in a minute, but I'll just point out that this year in 2024-25, we had a budgeted deficit of $74,000. Last year, we actually lost about $180,000 in there, so we thought we were going to do better, and I'm going to save the rest of that for my next agenda item because we've got some good things to talk about there. The trust fund is where our OPEB funds are for other post-employment benefits for our employees, as well as a sick leave component in that. That basically depends on what the retirees draw out of that fund on a year-to-year basis. Community Education Fund is the last fund there. What's important to recognize with that is if you have additional funds in that fund at the end of the year, it has to be used to reduce the levy for the preceding year. So the reason that there's $18,911 in there as a negative for 24-25 is that we had $18,911 in there at the end of 23-24, and we had to spend that money to budget to a $0 amount. It really depends on how popular our classes are and those types of things and what our costs are on a year-to-year basis, which will determine that, but it's always budgeted to be zero. And so if you have a balance at the end of the year, you have to basically levy less for whatever you made to get it to zero on a budget perspective. And then our last one is Fund 90. We used to be a significant user of Fund 90 with our federal program for help me, Leslie. Yeah, the Carl Perkins grants. We no longer are the administrative agent for, I think it was like 12 different districts in that regard. That was not part of our plan this year. So we didn't do that. There's still $90,000 in there, and that's because we are the administrative agent for the Badger Conference. So we have the pay the director of the conference, the secretary, and the treasurer for the conference out of these. Again, no property tax money goes into there. We collect from all the different parts of the Badger Conference to distribute those funds, as well as deal with officials and that type of thing. So with that said, any questions? Again, this is preliminary. You're going to hear more about the budget in the future.
All right, let's start with clarifying questions. I'll actually start with one, Andy, if no
Sounds
one
good.
else is ready. Could you explain under Fund 21, in the description we have DNR splash pad of the $321,000 grant on both the revenue and expenditure side, but the differential in that fund is $390,000?
I can try. Expenditures. I'm guessing that it's more than, especially the fund includes revenue, especially most often used.
So if we're expecting a
Yeah,
$321,000.
I wondered if that's a typo. It should probably match. I don't.
I think it's actually the money that we have collected from donations is a 390. So that's
That
what
could
we
be.
already
That's
have
about the right amount of money.
collected, and that does not include the grant money. We have not received any of that yet.
Correct.
The
So
grant money's forthcoming, this is
the
actually.
390 is, okay, that, you're trying to equate the grant to this, and what you're saying, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Basically, that's the funds that we've collected to date, and we're anticipating, since this is the budget for next year, we'd be spending them. It's correct, and we probably should have added that language to it, is that the grant money would then increase. Once we get it, we'd have to increase revenues and expenses to that number as well. So this is just the amount of money that we've collected to date. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Heather.
As a follow-up to Troy's question, for the splash pad budget, so we have 390 in our account now. The grant is 320, which we're the final grant that we're finding out, so
Right.
that's 780. So is that what there is to spend, like that is the budget for the splash pad?
Yeah, we occasionally are getting small donations still, but
Sure.
yes.
Okay. And sorry to,
And there's also some interest revenue as well. Yep.
sure, yes, I don't mean to be like completely hard to stop, but for the most part, 780 is what we have to work with. And then in that timeline, the grant decision is this month, right?
That's the timeline that has been explained to us in the past.
Okay, and then the bids that you're working on are,
Yeah, we are building, we're building kind of specifications, and getting, one of the vendors is going to give us kind of a budget for that, and then we're going to get additional pricing from other vendors to see what they would provide, just to make it competitive.
okay, and okay, yep, that's great. I just wanted to make sure the math was right in my head. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't have that on top of my head.
Andy, can you tell me about the Burmeister Woods amount that's on there and what that is?
Sure. That is one of those things that we've inherited over time. Years ago, there were folks within Burmeister Woods that would have rather been part of McFarland School District. And so we actually went to a state kind of a court of our peers, and I'm trying to remember the name of what that is. Yeah, it's the Board of Appeals, made up of basically school board members, your peers, that would decide whether people could partition to become part of another school district and come away from our district. As a problem-solving group, we in McFarland came up with a solution for them, and those particular people are able to come into our district. We have a 660301 agreement with them, with McFarland, that basically says if somebody comes to goes to McFarland School District and is in Oregon School District, we will pay them the open enrollment amount so that they can go to McFarland School District. And so that's what this is about.
All right, but we single this out specifically for that neighborhood as opposed to the other open enrollment basis.
So the reason is there are all kinds of rules that Gina could share with you related to open enrollment, and if those people wouldn't get a guaranteed spot because it's a lottery, and McFarland is very tight with who they let into their district on a traditional basis from open enrollment, and so this allowed them to make sure that they got there if they wanted to be there. You bet.
I have a follow-up. All these people asking good questions make me think of another good question. So is that inheritance piece that we have in perpetuity?
I believe we have if there's something we want to change in that, we have to give notification to McFarland and that type of thing within a certain date. Does that ring a bell with you?
I think we just renewed.
Yeah.
We did, we just renewed it.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. I just couldn't remember the length of time.
Yeah, it's been in place for a while.
Yep, okay, thanks.
Other questions? If not, I would accept a motion for approving the 25-26 June preliminary budget as presented. Motion by Dr. Bush. Second by Mr. Hensel. Katie, please call the roll.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Mr. Hensel?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pinkertz?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. We have a preliminary June estimate budget. Next up is C3, open enrollment. Ms. Jonan.
Well, thank you. And I would say that agreement predates me, so it probably is a 20-year agreement, but we will find that and get you the answer to that question. So I am looking for a motion and approval from the board to increase our open enrollment spaces. Just to refresh your memory, on the board meeting on January 27th, the board approved the number of spaces for open enrollment for the 25-26 school year. And you can see what the board approved in Table 1. As always, we really watch our enrollment and our resident growth. And I really want to thank Julie Fisher and Katie Heights in the district office because they do an amazing job of monitoring this. And in looking at our sections and our growth, we feel that we have additional spaces in 4-year-old kindergarten and in kindergarten that we can accept for students who do not need special education programming because we are very full in those programs with our students' needs. The nice thing we have with 4K and kindergarten is we have a little more flexibility about where those students attend school. We do try to be as efficient as possible with our transportation, and we also try to fill sections. So it's really a nice way if we have openings in different classes that we can fill those classes with open enrollment, which helps our budget. And we are always cognizant of the number of open enrolled seniors that we have graduating and trying to ensure that we have space for our residents, but then also can make up any budget gaps that we may have. So in looking at all of our numbers, we are asking the board to approve additional spaces in 4-year-old kindergarten. And that is largely due because Mariposa has added a section of 4-year-old kindergarten in Fitchburg, which is wonderful because we have growth in that area. And so we are very appreciative to them for doing that. And then we also have space in our kindergarten sections because we do have that flexibility of placement. I know Julie and Katie do a very nice job of making sure that kindergartners go where their siblings K4 would also attend because we don't want to split families from an elementary level. But to the extent we can even out those class sizes, that is really, really important to us. So looking at all of that and then still saving room for resident growth, if you look at Table 2, we feel really comfortable in recommending the board approve 17 additional spaces in 4-year-old kindergarten and 11 spaces in kindergarten. And just as a reminder, the kindergarten placements will go out in July. We do try to wait throughout the summer so that we can make sure families that move in have enrolled, we know where they live, and then we can balance out those section numbers.
All right, thanks, Gina. Any clarifying questions for Gina? Gina, I have one on the current kindergarten enrollment as of June 3rd. Is that tracking with typical enrollment amount, or?
My understanding is we're down a little bit from where we were last year, but we do have a number of places that have new construction, and so we are doing our best to get the word out for people to enroll and do that as one of the first things they do when they move here so that we know they're coming.
Okay, I will, if there's no clarifying questions, I'll accept the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Heather, is there a second? Second by Anna. Any further discussion on open enrollment? Leslie?
It's not really discussion. It's just I'd like to thank Mariposa to being willing to open up their doors for a whole nother class of 4K kids, and to all of our other partners that work with us to help support our education system in Oregon.
Yes, great. I agree, Leslie. Good. Thanks for making that statement. All right, Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Mr. Hensel? Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pinkertz?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. We have open enrollment spaces. All right, action item C4 is food service, and that's Mr. Wyland again.
It is, but I'm gonna get to introduce somebody to you as well. Our new director of nutrition and food services, Mandy Beeline. Did I do it right?
You did.
All right. Mandy took over for Sarah for us at the beginning of the school year. She comes to us from Southern California, but now lives closer to like DeForest or something, which is a much shorter commute. And so she's going to talk a little bit about our plans for the future. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about how this year seems to be ending, and then we'll kind of open it up to questions if that sounds to like a good plan for everybody. So if you recall, I mentioned before that last year we actually lost around $180,000 coming out of the pandemic. Food prices were going crazy for us. Things have settled down a little bit in that regard. And we seem to have a pretty good handle on things this year. And this is, please understand that we're not at audited numbers yet, but we took a snapshot and compared to last year at the end of May for the entire year, and then this year for the end of May. And we're about $198,000 better than where we were last year. So that's significant because, like I said, we lost about $180,000. It is conceivable, although maybe not probable, but because I don't want to raise expectations too high, but it is conceivable that we'll have balanced the revenues and expenses this year from food services. Keep in mind there is a transfer still because of the referendum that we all anticipated to help on wages. But if you exclude that, we could be kind of at a balance point. So that's really, really good news. And there's more good news. If you recall, we had kind of a three-pronged strategy last year in order to try to balance things out. One of the things that we set as kind of a goal, if you would, or identified what it would produce, is that if we increased our free and reduced lunch percentage by 10%, if you look at the graph, we actually increased them by, I believe, 12%. So we actually exceeded that. If you ask me why, I'm going to not be able to give you a real good answer, but we were able to do that. We're trying to make it accessible, trying to produce good food that the kids want to eat, all those types of things, but I can't point to one particular thing. Perhaps Mandy can. Full price, we were going to try to increase by 7%. We didn't quite hit that. We're about 5%. But we didn't have goals on breakfast. And if you look at our breakfast numbers, we actually did increase that. That's the BF grants. We did increase participation there by an additional 2% for everyone and an additional 5% for our free and reduced lunch students. So overall, a very, very strong year. We still have, 5 days, I guess, to count in all of this because it's a little preliminary. It's as of last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, not last Friday, which is the June information. But for the most part, I think we're right on where we want to be. We're actually exceeding where we wanted to be at the end of this last year. So good information. That said, I would say that we want to continue to increase prices a little bit to make sure that we can kind of make sure that we're solid into the future. Rather than doing 15 cents like we recommended last year, we'd like to do 10 cents for lunch and breakfast, and then 5 cents on milk would be our recommendation at this point in time. I will tell you that there are some challenges out there yet. One of the challenges is our uncollectible lunch balances is a little bit higher than we would like. And so we're working on that. What's important to recognize with this, and I was sharing it with the district office team today, is even though that's not collected, people owe us money, that's an asset on our balance sheet. So that's not really factored into these numbers because until it's written off, which we don't ever write off those balances unless they're seniors and they go away and we have no way of contacting them. Those balances will always stay there, in our fund balance. So that's a component to this. Another potential challenge that we have out there is from the federal level. If you've been following the budget reconciliation bill, there are cuts to different statewide programs that help feed people. We are the benefit of those programs in that there's this thing called direct certification. And what it is when people qualify for those benefit programs, we get a download for those students and automatically are able to put them into the free and reduced lunch program without having them to fill out forms. So it takes away a hurdle for our folks that are in need in that regard. So if those programs go away or are reduced or those types of things, we may get less direct certifications. It doesn't mean that people can't file for free and reduced lunch, but the amount of people that actually do that through the physical forms that we provide has really diminished to a very small percentage because the direct certification process is there. So that might hurt our free and reduced lunch numbers next year. So it's just another thing that we want people to be aware of. So with that said, maybe Mandy could share some of the great things, more great things that are going on in food service and her plans for this next year.
Well, thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. I know I've met some of you. I haven't met all of you, so thank you for having me. The numbers are exactly what Andy said right now. There isn't really a one pinpoint on why the numbers are so great. It's kind of just everything mixed together. Just because participation is up, we still like to get it up, so we do have some things in mind, definitely at the high school. So one of the suggestions is mid-year we did put a survey out asking what students would like to see a little different at the high school, and one of them was at the lunch period. We only have one line right now for the hot food. We have grab and go, and then we have a salad bar and stuff where kids can just come in and go. So over there, what we'd like to do is open 2 lines, which does mean that we're going to need extra hands. So without trying to add labor, we're going to ask, because we only need people probably for 20 minutes for the lunch serve to get them in and out at both of them. So we're going to ask some administrator, maybe there's some students who want extra hours to come and help us through the lunch line while serving. So that's one of our goals for the high school, instead of adding labor and to get the kids in and out. So hopefully more students eat with us. And that is part of reducing hours. We're looking at not adding any hours for next year. Right now we do want to reduce hours, which is one position right now. And so that's good to see where we don't need to add anyone. As of right now, we're not losing anyone, which is great to see. Everybody is coming back, which is very exciting for me. Definitely in food service, you always see people come and go. So it's nice that the staff is coming back. Definitely people who've been there for 20, 25 years, and until they retire, they're going to stay with us, which is great to see. We are going to start something as a commissary kitchen. It's something I would like to build here. It's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 5. It's going to take some time, but it's having one central located kitchen. Right now, I'm going to have it at the high school just because I have the most staff there, which I won't have to add staff to. Eventually, I'd love to put it at FES just because that kitchen is gorgeous. There's a lot of space there. But right now, until I build it, it's going to go to the kitchen. But it's something where we can start producing soups, bakery items, granola, things like that where we can make from scratch and then send it to the other kitchens. So that way I don't have to add more staff at the other kitchens to produce the homemade soups. And so that will also help with food costs. And you can I'll have to play around definitely with haven't really written many recipes for the Wisconsin that have to qualify for the Wisconsin nutrition program. So that's going to be a big learning thing for me this summer. But to make soups or make sauces that also have veggies in there for students and be like, look at how great this is as well. Where you can have that squash in the tomato and tomatoes together and you can't even tell that there's squash in there. Hide those veggies in there for them. And then there's something else I'd like to do is work with Jillian that I've talked to and have the students grow fresh herbs for us to put them into meals. And then I would like to also grow it, well, maybe she can help grow some fun veggies where we can do try-it days that the students can have a different vegetable that they're not used to. So I have a lot of fun things coming our way and we'll be building it.
As you can see, Mandy brings a fresh perspective to things, some great ideas that she wants to implement. She didn't start really until, when did you start this last year?
A day before school.
The day before school started. So, you know, it was a little bit of a fast learning curve for her, and she did a great job. So I wanted to publicly acknowledge that. She's been awesome, and the results kind of speak for themselves.
Go ahead, Gina.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just want the board to know I work with Mandy quite a bit. This is a very staff-intensive job. And, you know, the number one part of food service budget is the staff, right? Like any other place. And so she has really just done an amazing job of doing things through attrition, making things more efficient, helping people really work together and be a team. If you've ever come in our kitchens, it is an incredibly hard job to feed that amount of students in a very short amount of time and provide food that they like and they'll eat, and that our custodians aren't really angry with us that we serve. And so just from a personnel standpoint, she has just done an amazing job of working with the staff, managing the staff. We still really have vacancies and absences that we struggle with. And she and Jenny have done an amazing job of being in the kitchen and helping when needed. And her staff have told me over and over again how much they appreciate that they're willing to be there and work side by side with them. So I just wanted you to know from an HL personnel standpoint, she does a beautiful job of working with her team. And they really admire and respect her as a leader.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Mandy. We at about this time last year, the board had set a target of trying to do better than last year with our budget, and you've exceeded that. So we give you credit for that. But it's so great to hear. You know, it's more than just the dollars. It's great to hear your additions of healthy foods and other great ideas to incorporate other avenues that are going to bring students to taking our hot lunch. So. Any other comments? Actually, before we get too far, let's get a motion on the floor.
I'll make a motion to recommend the food price increase of 10 cents for lunch and 5 cents for milk for the 2025-26 school year.
10 cents for breakfast and lunch. Just
Thank
to
you.
clarify.
Yes,
Yep.
10
Okay.
cents for breakfast and lunch.
Motion by Anna. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dr. Bush. All right. Any discussion on that motion? Heather.
Thank you for putting this together, and congratulations on the success this year. I'm super excited to hear about the commissary and the veggies and sauces and all of the things like that. So thank you for your work on that as well. My only question is, so I see the increased prices, but do we have a sense of what our actual hard cost increase is? Like, is this covering the cost and then a little bit? Is it not covering the cost? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, we would estimate at this point in time that it should cover our costs and maybe a little bit. But I would also say there's a fair amount of uncertainty.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Sorry if I missed it in the presentation or in the packet, but do we have a sense of what would the financial impact be if we didn't raise prices at all?
yeah, I think I put that in there, $27,000.
$27,000.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
First, I want to say I've already met Mandy at a couple of events, and her passion is amazing. She has all these cute little food stickers and everything else. She's so awesome, and I love all the ideas that you have. That's great. I do want to know, and I don't know whether to ask you or to ask Andy for this, but how much is the uncollectible amount that we have at this point?
So do we have a better number than me? I have some, okay, you do? Okay.
Okay, it's, as of this morning, it was negative 21,000.
Which is significantly better because as of about 2 weeks ago, it was like 29,000. So I will tell you, last year it was around 11 at the end of the year. So we're still trying to collect, but probably it's gone up a little bit compared to where it was at the end of the year last year.
Yeah, you.
Well, and one thing to add is about 1,500 of that is staff outstanding balances. And so Mandy and I have worked hard to collect that before staff left for the summer. And the HR department has committed to deducting each and every one of those unpaid balances out of payroll. And so just to let you know that, because that is a manual process, and now some are 10 cents, some are $1.25, so it's not all big amounts. But if staff are watching, we would love for you to pay off your balance tomorrow so we don't have to do that through payroll. But that is something new that we're doing this year. Last year we did, I think, anything over $50 because of the manual process. But this year we committed to doing everyone. So I just wanted to point out it's not all on our families, it's staff too, but we appreciate them using the food service program.
Anna, go ahead, and then Heather.
I do have a question about the uncollected funds, and it's more so a curiosity on whether this is a new approach that's been used or not. I'm a first-time parent of a senior, and so we had remaining funding in their school lunch account, and so we got a Google form that said, and we saw so many of those, right, coming through, and I haven't seen that before. So I'm wondering if that's a new option, but I was given the option of receiving a check for my remaining funds or donating it to the uncollected fund contribution. And so I elected to do that, but I thought it was awesome that that option was presented to families to fill that gap. And so I'm curious if that's brand new, like this year, or if that's been something that's been a thing and I just haven't had been a senior parent before to experience that.
I would say I believe it's been a thing, but I think we did a much better job this year messaging it and kind of communicating that. So thank you to Erica for her work on that, along with the food service staff.
And then I have another quick question, just while I have the mic, and then I will defer to my other board members. I picked up on the change for the production kitchen for Brooklyn. And I just have two questions about that. I guess, is the main rationale that it's closer, so it's just going to reduce some transportation cost? Or is it also just because that is a better equipped kitchen, maybe from a staffing perspective compared to OMS? I'm just curious, I guess, how that transition will go. It sounds like you've got staff that are on board with this and it's going to work out well. But I'm just curious, what is the primary motivator for that?
It's for staffing, so I don't have to add extra staff to the middle school. Because otherwise I'd have to add 1 to 2 people over at the middle school, and RCI is completely, has enough people.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, you're up.
As a follow-up to the unpaid balances conversation, I remember from years past that we had funding from Orchard. So that would be used to pay that off, and now that we do not have that this year, correct?
That is a challenge that we have this year that we haven't had for probably a decade. Typically, just so people understand what would happen there, typically with free and reduced lunch students, if you're moving a school, we would use the Orchard's funds to kind of get rid of any negative balances that were in the free and reduced lunch students' accounts. Since they're free and reduced lunch, the balances typically weren't that large, but there could be some a la carte that was bought and those types of things if that got through the line. So it did help us, but yeah, that is a tool we do not have at our disposal this year.
Got it. Thank you.
Caleb.
So I have a couple questions. One of them is fairly close to the first question that Heather asked about the price increase. The 10-cent price increase and the 5-cent price increase on milk. Can you remind me what's the maximum that we can raise prices? Because I know on milk there's a maximum. Is there a maximum for lunch and breakfast too?
So not necessarily like a statutory maximum or anything.
Okay.
DPI has had a guideline in the past where they said do not go over a dime, because if you do, we disproved this theory this last year, but if you do, you may impact your participation rates because people might start reacting negatively to that large of a price increase. So we kind of went back to that this year, kind of looked at things and said we can make that work.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is because I just very quickly looked up the consumer price index and what it is, right? Because it's for food, it's in April it was 2.8%. Though that was the increase in the consumer price index. And so my thinking is, and it kind of was what Heather was asking, is that if we're not cognizant of like the inflation rate and the fact that costs are always going up, even though we've made lots of progress, I don't want us to slip and start not covering potential cost increases. I know there's other ways to pay for things besides having, what we charge for meals, but I just think it's an important thing to consider or to think about, because in years when there's really, really high inflation and the prices of goods is going up dramatically, and we only raise things 10 cents or 5 cents, and I completely support that because I think it's fair to not pass a big cost increase on to families, but there's a very fine balancing act there that I think we should try to be at least somewhat conscious of. I'm not sure how, but I just wanted to get that out there and see what I remembered there was a number, and it was that 10-cent number, but I couldn't remember the rationale behind it.
Yeah.
The other question that I had that kind of ties into participation rates, and if we have any idea, because if you look at the numbers, there were a couple schools, Brooklyn, Prairie View, RCI, that did quite well on their participation increases. Do we have a sense of what they did, or did they do something different? Or if we don't have a sense, are conversations happening where ideas are being shared across schools? And I know every school is different and the makeup of students is different, so it's not completely a fair comparison, but I just wonder if there's been any conversation about that.
Some, not a ton. I think we will have more conversations about that. The one conversation we had was we identified from a breakfast perspective that most schools, except, and Mandy can help me tell me which ones don't, but most schools allow breakfast to be eaten in the classroom. There is one or two that do not.
Brooklyn and the high school.
But if you look at Brooklyn's participation rates for breakfast, they were actually higher than a lot of other people. So it's not, we can't put our finger on it right now. We're going to keep thinking about this. The analysis obviously was fairly fresh as of last week. So I think we're going to keep asking those questions, but we do not have a great pulse on it yet. Forest Edge went down, I think, on lunch participation. We're kind of confused by that as well. I think that's right on breakfast. Yeah. So we gotta kind of dive a little bit further into this. Going back to your other question, if a 3% increase, right? So this kind of coincides with a $3 meal is right around 10 cents. So we're in the ballpark. We also, I guess, would, maybe you're like, well, why don't you have it, at 7 cents or something? We like round numbers as much as possible. So we always kind of go to the highest nickel, I guess, if you would. So that's probably part of the strategy as well.
I'll just add my back of the envelope math, or actually it was my Apple calculator math, was like 2.6%. A 10-cent increase on like a $3.50 meal or $3 is like 2.6%. So, I mean, it's pretty close to the consumer price index as of April. So,
and I can include that as part of the analysis in the future is like, hey, let's look at CPI. And if that's part of the rationale that makes sense to you guys, we can absolutely look at that and try to make that make sense as well.
I do think, I'm only one voice on the board, but I do think that is something to consider. Okay. Especially in years like we've had in the past couple of years when the CPI has gone up fairly dramatically. Yep. because the risk is, right, that as we struggle to get things balanced, that, those cost challenges can have us, if we're not paying attention to that and keeping up with that, then we're going to be back in a deficit again in a couple of years. But it's amazing looking at the progress that's been made. It's commendable to see how much progress has been made in getting things balanced.
Anna?
I just am wondering if we've set goals for the upcoming year as far as participation rates. So we've set heavy goals last year as a mechanism to get us to this point. If we can continue to see that grow, we could even continue to make us whole a little bit on the transfer of funds that we've already accounted for with our referendum. But I'm curious if that's something that we're looking at this year to see if we can continue to grow and see those trends continue to improve with just overall participation, but also our free and reduced.
I think next year a big goal would be the free and reduced. Participation is always a big thing, but more is just continue with free and reduced. And definitely with the direct certification, that's going to be a big factor for me where we're going to have to reach out to those families, because where they were automatically enrolled is now we have right now 780 direct certified people in our district. So that means if people aren't going to be direct certified, that's more people for us to reach out to, which is also a good opportunity for us to reach out to more families and make a bigger push on free and reduced lunch, which I think a lot of people don't realize that mid-year that they can apply, because a lot of the people that I've been calling with the balances and stuff, they've lost a job or they have some medical bills, and all those things add up where they don't realize that they can apply. So for me, it's going to be a big push in the free and reduced. I don't have a set number. That is something that I can get back to you on.
So I was not, Oh, I misunderstood. I thought that the comment was that there's going to be a direct referral, which will eliminate a barrier. No. I misheard that. It's the opposite. We're introducing a barrier. Lovely. Okay. What strategy are we using to address that? I mean, is that something that I hope that that's something we're looking into to address that.
Just to be clear with everybody, that hasn't passed. That's just a proposal right now in the budget reconciliation bill that passed the House but hasn't gone to the Senate. So not sure where that is yet, but we're thinking about it.
So that's been introduced but not passed.
It's passed the House, but it hasn't passed the Senate. So that's where we are in that process.
So emails could be sent to
your federal representatives. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so if that does become a thing, I hope that we have a really good strategy for how to reach out to our families and make sure that we are reducing the barrier for any family that may need access to that.
So 27,000 is what we pick up if we add.
Correct.
And how much did we net back again this year from our goals and our improvements?
64,141 was the estimate, based on those numbers that we talked about as far as increases. We exceeded the free and reduced lunch, but we didn't quite hit the full price one by 2%. So I'll call it even and say right around that $60,000 range.
So would we be leaving money on the table if we did not pass this tonight, leaving the prices as they sit, benefiting our families by not raising it, setting our own efficiency goals, since we've proven to ourselves that we can indeed hit them and in fact double them by what we're asking for an increase on tonight? So that, or are we actually disadvantaging ourselves from a free and reduced reimbursement perspective, but my vote would be on the local families?
What I would say is that, yes, we hit our numbers. I would say in bringing Mandy into the system at the beginning of the school year, I don't know that we had a strategy that specifically was implemented to hit these numbers. It just happened. And for us to rely on that just to happen again would scare me a little bit. I wish I could tell you something better, like this is the strategy, it specifically worked. We didn't talk about it, but we actually did some cost reductions by reducing a bar line at RCI. That did save us $30,000 because we reduced some staff. We absolutely did that. But that participation nut to crack that is something that's a little tougher, I think, to project. I wished it was easier. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I balance keeping up with ongoing costs annually, right?
Yeah.
If we all have certain things in our own personal lives that never go up year over year, you know that there's a cliff coming, and we don't want to create that for families either.
Right, right.
But I'm just thinking if we can continually save and reduce waste and create efficiencies and whatnot, can we spare that and not pass that cost on to our families?
The other thing I would say is a goal, and I can't say we're going to hit it this next year, but was kind of goes to what Anna just said, is I would, over time, and it might take a decade or two, but we are doing this transfer from the general fund to the food service fund before we get to the point of not keeping up with inflation and kind of moving. I'd like us to kind of take care of that, because we're probably might be one of the only districts in the state that actually counts on that transfer to kind of fund higher wages for our food service staff, which has an impact, a positive impact, and that's what Mandy talked about with, keeping staff. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, Nathan, I think that's a really good observation, is that question about, the federal reimbursement rate, increasing that versus our families. And I remember having that discussion last year, recognizing that our free and reduced percentage has been climbing in the community as well. So I think I'm inclined to for this year, again, to stick towards increasing the rate, to rely a little bit more on that federal reimbursement, and see where we end up next year.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and appreciate everybody's hard work, and certainly yours as well. And I think it was just if we can achieve this, can we set the bar and raise the bar and help? So I appreciate the conversation. I think it's good due diligence for us to have those. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other discussion on this topic, Caleb?
I just have a very quick question that kind of follows on everything we've been talking about. We've had the food service budget has had a deficit for several years running now, and we're narrowing that deficit. Can you tell us right now, what's the projection next year in terms of the deficit? Are we there yet, or?
So for next year, my plan would be absolutely to be there. This year, we might be there. There's a chance. It's just we got to let the bills kind of come in and the revenues finalize as well. So absolutely, by next year, I want to be at a balance with the asterisk of the transfer that we're doing from the referendum. So, and then I think the goal should be, from my perspective, let's try to reduce that transfer and leave more funds in Fund 10. That could take a long time to kind of recoup that $110,000. Maybe not. Maybe it could be quicker. I just don't want to count on it, especially with some of the hurdles that are out there from a federal perspective. I think it is an opportunity to communicate with parents, but that number that she said, that 800 number or 700 number, that's the majority of everybody that's free and reduced in our district. There weren't many people filling out forms like they used to in the olden days. To go back to that will be a hurdle. If that happens, that's, again.
All right. Katie, please call the roll.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Hensel?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mandy. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Have a good night.
All right, next agenda item is C5, Policy 416, Academic Assistance, Grade Acceleration, Promotion, and Retention. Coming to us from Policy, Leslie is going to fill in for Mary on this.
Last policy meeting, we spent some time reviewing some updates to Board Policy 416, Academic Assistance, Grade Acceleration, Promotion, and Retention, due to just cleaning up and also some legal things that I'm going to throw to Darcy and let her do some more intense explanation.
Is it still on? Can you hear me? Is it up? Is this better? I kind of feel like I am. Okay, so I am just coming to talk a little bit about the policy tonight. And I want to answer two questions as I talk about it. I want to answer why now? Why are we talking about this now? And how has Policy 416 changed? Because it is important to know that we had a Policy 416 and that policy was last approved in 2013. The passage of Act 20 in the last year served as a really big impetus for all of us to take a fresh look at the policy. And so Act 20 actually introduces some really specific requirements around student promotion, but particularly at the third to fourth grade level in literacy. But it's important to recognize that this policy does not just reflect literacy. We had the opportunity, Kim White and I had the opportunity to move beyond compliance and really work on a policy that gave us a chance to see our values within the policy. So we were very intentional about realigning the policy with our district mission and vision, about including our portrait of a graduate, and about making sure that our deep belief in equity and the whole child development was embedded within the policy. So I'm probably going to say this a whole bunch of times. It's super important to recognize that this policy goes beyond literacy. It reflects our broader commitment to meeting students where they are, understanding their individual needs, and ensuring that they have the support and resources necessary to grow. By reworking the policy, we are fully in compliance with Act 20, but we're also affirming who we are as a district. So the next thing I just want to talk a little bit about is you guys all have the original one from 2013 as well, right? So I want to point out a couple of the significant changes that we've done that we wanted to be intentional about making sure that this policy was student-centered and aligns with our portrait of a graduate. So things that you might notice is that there is integration of Act 20 throughout the entire policy. There were recommendations sometimes to just use Act 20 as an appendix to our already standing policy, but we wanted to be really clear and consistent about all of our approaches and the decisions that go beyond promotion and retention. You should also notice the 2025 version has a tiered system for promotion decisions, which balances local assessment, standardized scores, and importantly, the team review. You should also notice that this is a holistic, equity-driven process with clearly defined roles for educators, administrators, and our student services staff. We have emphasis on academic supports that go beyond just remediation. It's important that we incorporate evidence-based interventions, enrichment, and also you'll see social emotional considerations embedded within the policy. You should notice that it's a broader and more inclusive retention process with early identification, comprehensive review, and collaborative teams across the board. There is increased involvement of parents who are now viewed as active partners in the process, and we have specific attention paid to our multilingual learners. So that's super, super high level, and I just want to again stress that this is not just limited to literacy, but it does meet all of the requirements for Act 20. So this is the policy that was a joint effort Kim and I started, and with our district office colleagues worked on this policy for a while. And I think that it shows that we are more than compliant. It shows our commitment to equity and the whole child.
All right. Thank you, Darcy. Any questions on Policy 416? Yeah, Dr. Bush.
So this is something that was talked about in the committee meeting, and I just wanted to kind of get this on the discussion table here in the meeting of the whole. We talked about, this ties into what we were talking about earlier with special education funding, because one of the things that was talked about in the committee meeting was some of the requirements that Act 20 puts in place specifically for students with IEP plans, and some of the interventions that have to be made to make sure that and we want them to be progressing. But can you just remind me and tell everyone here In terms of IEPs, like what are the numbers that we're looking at there for students in our district that have IEPs? And then what's the potential in terms of the challenges for staffing to have people who have the credentials, right, to do that kind of intensive instruction?
So I don't have exact numbers of students with IEPs, but one of the reporting compliance pieces for Act 20 is for our district to determine how many new referrals for IEPs we got as a result of the personalized reading plan, and we had one through all of our sites. So I know that the work that we're doing didn't increase our number of IEPs. I don't know the exact number. I can get that for you though, and I can. Those students aren't exempt from personalized reading plans, so we're servicing students with IEPs in the same way that we would anyone that falls under the benchmark set by Act 20.
So just a follow-up question with that, I was a little confused. So the testing that we did at the 3rd grade level, it across the whole district, in the 3rd grade, only one person. So there were no additional, other than one kiddo that had to have additional help to get up to the correct level?
No, there were no other special ed referrals started as a result of.
All right, that makes more
assessment.
sense. So with that being said, how many kiddos needed assistance to get up to where needed to be? Not necessarily an IEP, but maybe a learning plan to get to the correct reading level.
We had a lot of students. So our biggest population was in our 1st grade, which was no different than anywhere in the state. The first testing window, which was in January, was the largest. We were just under 80%. I think we were like 79% proficient across the district. I can get you like a better number for that. But what it was frustrating on was that it was still below that 80% mark. But we serviced all the students that needed to be serviced based on falling under the 25 percentile, and were able to release at the second testing window. And we chose if they were above the 25th percentile, or if progress monitoring showed that they were meeting their goal. Now, at the last testing window, we did not release PRPs because we wanted to just kind of make sure that the students were on watch in the upcoming year, so that we can see how our interventions are working. I do know that like our summer school numbers are the number of students we invited was significantly higher because of their teacher recommendations due to a PRP.
Sorry that I co-opted your thing here, Caleb, I just have one more question with this. So then, obviously our summer school numbers, staffing went up. What did that mean for our staffing from January, when the point we identified this, to the end of school year? What did that do to our staffing numbers, or the staff that we had? Or were they just crazy overwhelmed, or did they have additional help, or how did we handle that?
So we started preparing for this before we even knew Act 20 was going to be a thing. So we had a lot of our almost all of our teachers were already trained in letters before Act 20 told us that we had to. So we had built in a lot of teacher capacity that helped our teachers feel confident in meeting the needs of our students and understanding the progressions of the phases that students go through. Second thing is we spent, not this school year, but the school year prior, with Kim White working with our interventionists to be a lead and a point person for each of the schools. So our interventionists in each of the schools really were well equipped to handle the needs of the students within the building, as our teachers kind of handled that like tier 2 kind of, the kids that they could service effectively in the classroom.
So a lot of the kids stayed in classroom, and there was a smaller number that went to the interventionists. Yeah. Is that my understanding correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you foresee this affecting our staffing going forward?
I see us becoming more sort of like streamlined and finely attuned with what the assessment is looking for. I don't predict that our numbers will be even nearly as high next year, because even after that first testing window, excuse me, which we didn't have to do by state compliance, we just did to see where we were. We already had like all hands on deck with, kindergarten teachers saying like, well, students had never seen the ORF before, which is the oral reading fluency assessment. So maybe we could make sure that students aren't unfamiliar with what that assessment looks like. So we were doing all kinds of conversations talking about how we can introduce letter name sounds earlier within the kindergarten and first grade curriculum, because our curriculum right now goes a little bit slower than where the state benchmarks are. So we've already been working on how we can improve in the upcoming years.
Thank you, Darcy, and also thank you, Caleb. Sorry.
Caleb, any other comments?
I guess I have one follow-up, and it might be me misremembering discussion, but you mentioned that there's a large number, not a surprising, but a large number of students that need the summer school reading curriculum. I remember in our discussion at the committee meeting that one of the challenges with meeting the need is that teachers have to have the special reading credentials, right? And that's going to be an increasing concern going forward if more students need that kind of intensive extra attention so that we can help them meet the requirements. What does that look like? I mean, in terms of our staffing, where are we at? Do we have enough people with those credentials? Are we going to be trying to figure out ways to get more people with those credentials? I guess ties into what I was thinking about earlier in terms of some of the increasing demands that this is going to put, that the policy Act 20 and the policy is going to put on us, making sure that we're doing everything we can to help students achieve.
So thank you. I brought it up here with me. I think it's in the administrative guidelines. Thank you. We talk about how the having that teacher with the 316 license is going, like, we'd love the policy to go into effect today or past today, but then that we give ourselves until September of 2027 to ensure that we have that. I don't even feel a little bit worried that we would be prepared to meet those requirements.
Gina?
We also received some very good news from DPI that they clarified that the summer reading program has to be under the direction of a teacher that has a 416 license, but the classroom instruction for summer school doesn't need to have everyone have a 416 license. And that makes much more sense because every district in the state would have a significant hurdle to overcome. So that was helpful clarification that Kim White received from DPI.
Sounds like reality set in.
Yeah, or inartful drafting, which we lawyers can be guilty of sometimes.
That's kind of what I was trying to, in a roundabout way, get to, right? Is that there are some challenges with making sure this gets implemented the way it needs to be implemented. And I'd forgotten the 2027 number. So yeah, that also makes sense.
Anything from this side of the table? All right, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Hensel?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Darcy, and please thank Kim White for us as well. It's clear that you and your team have a strong passion for this. So. All right, where are we? We are now moving to committee reports. Vision and strategic planning, that's Anna as chair.
We just sent out a doodle poll to get some dates for a July meeting. June was occupied. So we're looking at July. And so please check out the poll. If you haven't submitted, please do so. We'd like to get one on our calendar for July.
Great. Thank you, Anna. And for policy committee, Mary's not here. Leslie, you want to jump in?
Yes, our next meeting is going to be June 30th, I believe. Yes, okay. And we've already kind of went over what we did our last meeting, so.
Great.
Can I,
Thank you. Go ahead.
it's not on the agenda, but I attended the wellness committee meeting, wellness. Can I speak to that, or should I wait to give a report? It's not on the agenda. Okay. Okay, perfect. Can we add that to the next agenda, please? Thanks.
Yeah, please. All right. So now we go to information items, visioning, and strategic planning. Dr. Bergstrom, and you can move right into teaching and learning and superintendent's report.
Sorry, I touched it and I didn't touch it well enough. I am going to move right into the superintendent's report because it is meaty. When you only have one meeting in the month of June and so many fantastic things are happening, such as graduation, I want to make sure we're giving it the time that it deserves. And starting the superintendent report, I just want to also point out that summer semester is beginning. We just graduated our seniors and we're talking about summer semester the next day because it is really less than a month when it begins. You can see that we have passed our registration window when our two sessions are occurring. 83 unique classes, which is really quite extraordinary. Over 1,400 students signed up, and that is actually an increase, and I think that's really, really exciting. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that this was coming up. It's a really important part of what happens in the Oregon School District in the summer, and as you can tell, a significant number of our students participate because that number, as it states, does not even include OHS credit recovery. Quite a few. Now, the good stuff. First of all, we were celebrating our retirees just a couple of weeks ago in this room. We have so many amazing educators who are at that point in their life where they're looking to do something different. And you can see from the pictures that it was a very joyful event. Barb Werner at the bottom did a rendition of Blue Skies. She has a marvelous voice and she shared it with us that evening. And then you can also see Lynn Schultz in the corner where she had all 10 of her grandchildren here. So it was just a really nice event, a way to say thank you to these really amazing educators, of which Principal Pliner is certainly one. And the high school, they took the celebration a step further, and before the end of the school year, they had a surprise parade featuring Mr. Pliner and all kinds of pictures, as you can see, of Mr. Pliner. So the staff and the students lined the halls and cheered, and the band followed along behind him. It was, once again, a really joyful way to say thank you to an amazing educator. And then the circus rolled into Brooklyn Elementary, and the kindergarten stars stole the show. So you can see the strong people lifting the weights, the tightrope walkers. They had all kinds of performances. So a huge thank you to Mrs. Rutz for bringing this magic to life. What a circus show they had. And then our second graders, this is such a cool thing. They got to have high school pen pals for an entire quarter. So it was the second grade pen pals were in Mrs. Cox's class at Netherwood, and they met their OHS pals. So throughout their time corresponding, pen pals have been building a unique connection through their puppy problems, in which high school students take photos of stuffed animal puppies in predicaments and then ask the second graders to use problem-solving skills and regulation strategies to help the puppies through the predicaments. How fantastic is that? So each week, our social emotional learning coaches coordinated these relationship building activities, and then they were all able to get together at the end of the school year. So that's about as good as it gets. And then our Prairie View kindergartners, look at these serious scholars. They've been learning all about trees, and the students took advantage of the weather and took their learning outside to make their nature observations. And these young scientists were encouraged to find 4 different things in nature to thoughtfully observe and then sketch with detail using art, like strategies like texture and shading, which if you can do that at kindergarten, that's pretty amazing stuff. And then our second graders, they learned all about unpredictable spring weather because they had a fascinating learning opportunity with a visit from a meteorologist from WKOW 27, meteorologist Emma Heitpes. Students were thoroughly engaged in the discussion and super enthusiastic. So thank you to Miss Valentine, Miss Neindorf, and Miss Dretsky for arranging this relevant and timely opportunity. And then we had the Forest Edge Marigold Festival. And look at the food in front of the students there in the larger picture. That is quite a beautiful and healthy spread. So the Forest Edge Elementary School proudly hosted its first ever Marigold Festival, a celebration of many cultures that make up the Forest Edge community. The evening was filled with music, dancing, crafts, marigold planting, and delicious multicultural dishes generously provided by the Forest Edge families. So it was a beautiful evening and really meaningful. And I think Miss Majeski said it was one of the best community events she's ever attended. So, high praise. And RCI, they had a field day. Green One team at Rome Corners brought the energy and enthusiasm to the annual Team Olympics, from tug of war to the tic-tac-toe relay, capture the flag, that's a very large flag to capture, and so much more. The day was packed with friendly competition and teamwork and a lot of fun. And OHS sophomore Tony Perkins is credited for capturing these amazing photos. So thank you, Tony. Forest Edge had a staff Olympics too. I wish I could have seen this also. The gymnasium was buzzing with excitement and filled with smiles. Kids loved to watch staff members compete in fun and silly competitions. They were supporting and cheering on their teachers. 6th grade, they went out, the Forest Edge kids at 6th grade had a wonderful day at the Lucier Family Heritage Center, where they learned valuable survival skills. Students participated in several outdoor activities, including fort construction. If they constructed that fort, I am mightily impressed. Isn't that pretty cool looking? And fire starting. So thanks to our dedicated educators for making this happen for them. And then the other Be a Champion mentor celebration, that was so much fun. So the mentors and the mentees gathered to celebrate their time together and to recognize this strong connection that they built with one another. And we're always looking for more adults to serve as mentors for our students. And you can learn more on our website, OregonSD.org. Then you look for well-being, and then you look under mentoring, and it's all right there. And our middle school students went to Lerner Park with the Oregon Rotary. This is a really great community connection. Several of us are able to go and assist, and it is, I don't know, it's just a very special day because you have community members from around the area working shoulder to shoulder with our students and making a giant difference in Lerner Park. When you can physically see the land that has been cleared through this partnership over time, it's a completely different space due to this partnership. It's really exciting, and many thanks to the students and to Oregon Rotary, and of course to the teachers who organize everything. OHS physics class, they applied their learning at Six Flags Great America. It sounds like the best learning application I can think of. They gathered electronic data from the rides to inform their learning. So thanks again to our educators for organizing this hands-on and relevant activity. And our high school photography class took a big field trip to Horicon Marsh. Oh, those are beautiful examples of their work. So they had a wonderful day practicing their artistic skills and capturing the photographs you see here. So many thanks to Mr. Derrick for offering this really amazing, relevant, and engaging opportunity. High school construction class. I don't know how many of you were able to tour the house during the open house, but it really, you can tell very easily that there was a lot of care and attention put into building this home. We're very grateful for the collaboration with our local contractor, who provides this valuable hands-on experience for our students on all aspects of residential construction. So congratulations on a job well done to our OHS team. We're really proud of your accomplishment. Now, our high school students, Erica in the center, Erica Brisky, Bo Jacob, and Leah Washensky, they performed together at the Jerry Ensemble Cabaret held at the Madison Overture Center very recently. And you will probably recognize all of them for the role they played in Little Mermaid. And then we had 2 high school students, Tim and Gavin. They recently met with State Representative and Oregon resident Jenna Jacobson. And during the meeting, they shared information about positive social norming. And what they focus on is the fact that most students are not using alcohol and other drugs. And so they work really hard to get messages out to the school community that not everybody's doing it. As a matter of fact, most kids aren't doing it. And the importance of messaging that. And then they also spoke to her about the risks of vape devices and nicotine pouches and the environmental dangers of improper disposal. So Tim and Gavin were also accompanied by Cynthia DiCamelli and Amy Miller from the Oregon Cares Community Coalition, who are supporting these important efforts. Then some really great spotlights. So this one is Tanner. He's in architectural instruction. We have 3 spotlights tonight. The courses that led up to this capstone experience for Tanner are wood manufacturing, advanced wood manufacturing, and employability work skills experience. Tanner also has an OSHA 10 and first aid cert. And then this is Krish. Krish is taking, to get to this particular apprenticeship, Krish took AP Computer Science Principles, Digital Technology 1 and 2, Web Design, Business, Economics, and Marketing, and Personal Finance. That's a lot. He did a lot to gain this apprenticeship that he has working at One Community Bank and IT. So congratulations, Krish. And now we have Karthikaya, and he is also in information technology, and he is working at UW Health. So courses that have prepared him for this experience include AP Computer Science, Principles in Artificial Intelligence, and he's participated in coding events with Future Business Leaders of America and pursuing an Azure 104 certification. Is that right? Did I say it right? Okay, very nice. Sophomores and juniors who are interested in your youth apprenticeship options should contact Ms. D'Amelio, our school to career coordinator, to learn more. Our tennis team, we sent some students to state. We sent, they took the Division I, they won the Division I sectional at Lake Geneva, and then our senior doubles team of Braden Bakken and Hayden Lawrence went to state, and they won their first match and then lost their second, but you can see champion written all over them over there. So great job, Braden and Hayden. And then we had some track members who went to state, and they did really, really well. So Rory Dexter went for the high jump and took 15th. Jacqueline Shalitsky was a 200 meters and took 8th. That's really amazing too. Annabelle Schwartz went for 2 things. She went for the 100-meter hurdles and took 12th, and the triple jump and took 21st. And then Jacob Yorger, he did the pole vault and took 2nd in the state. And softball is going to state. This is really exciting. After winning the WIAA Division I sectional 8-7 in extra innings against Milton, the softball team is headed to the tournament. Now this is Wednesday of this week at 1:30 in the afternoon at the Goodman Complex. They'll be playing against Hamilton Sussex. And so exciting stuff happening Wednesday afternoon. And this is the first trip to state for softball in a couple of decades. So this is really, really cool and exciting. And then girls soccer will play their sectional game on Thursday night at 7 p.m. against Wanakee. So we've got some really good postseason play happening. If softball wins Wednesday afternoon, guess what? They play 7 p.m. Thursday evening. So our fans are going to be split as far as which team they are supporting on Thursday night should our wonderful softball team win on Wednesday afternoon. And then, of course, look at all these last day waves and hugs. It's always really bittersweet. It's fun to see the kids really excited and to participate in all of the end of the year, traditions, but it's also really sad to know that the kids aren't coming back to the buildings for quite some time. So, like I said, bittersweet's a good description. Now, just have to do a little bit of celebration of our seniors. Here you have them doing that really extra special time where they're going to their elementary schools, walking those familiar hallways, and offering inspiration to the younger kids. So you can see they create congratulations posters and do cheers. And a lot of our teachers, if you've been here long enough, you are able to see your class come back. And that's really special to people too. And all of this nostalgia, we did a little Facebook challenge. Many thanks to Erica for thinking of this because it's so cute. Families were invited to participate in the Class of 2025 Then and Now challenge, where they could share photos of their young child and their big grown-up child side by side to be able to see how far students have come. Very sentimental to look at those photos. And then the culmination, of course, is the ceremony. And you can see that the ceremony really takes a lot of people to make it happen. We have the wonderful volunteers from the VFW. OCA Media is a part of it. So many staff members, our board members, our students, all of them who come to play in the band on that afternoon. It really is a community event and a great example of strong family and community partnerships. And then this is an example of the full house. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? And just our ability at this moment in time to be able to hold it in our own gymnasium is pretty special. Most school districts are not able to do that anymore, but we have an extra large gymnasium. And of course, we'll continue to evaluate that as time goes on, but you can see that it's a really unifying event. And then the ceremony, all of our kids in their hats waiting for that opportunity. And then here they go. There's clear joy that our students have when they walk across the stage, and it really is clear. I have the immense honor of shaking their hand and looking into their eyes, and they feel really good at that moment, and they should. It really is Portrait of a Graduate in action. And then here you see some more diploma joy, and these are all pictures taken by Erica. Many thanks to her for, she took over 1,000 pictures that day. And she was photo editing for a very good portion of her day. So many thanks, Erica. But you can see all kinds of familiar faces on here. Not all, but many of our staff members' children are represented on this particular slide. And then just a reminder to check out our podcasts. Our 3 speakers here, they were interviewed by Dr. Anderson, who was our guest facilitator for the podcast. And so they really were fun to talk to. So I encourage you all to take a listen. And remember to subscribe. We have some really good podcasts coming up. That's it.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, we'll move on to closing. Let's do checkout. Leslie, anything? Caleb? Heather? Nathan? Anna? Anything for checkout? All right, then that completes our open session portion of tonight's meeting. So I will consider a motion of adjourning to closed session on item G1 as provided under Wisconsin Statutes 19.85. That's discussion about negotiations with the Oregon Educational Association and other staff regarding compensation for the 2025-26 school year pursuant to 19.851C and 19.851E. And also the second closed session item is consideration of performance evaluation regarding district administrator pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.851C. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? Motion by Anna, second. Second by Nathan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries 6-0. We'll move into closed session after a short 5-minute recess. Thank you.